Evil, nefarious aliens have invaded Earth. Earth lost. What are you gonna do about it, Commander?
Hello, I'm Don't Price Christian Gamer. Right here, I have with me my old pastor, who's so old and mentor, great man. I don't know if you want me to say your name or not.
Sure, go nuts.
Because certain people are like,
please don't put me out there.
Oh, no, I'm not like that, dude.
So this is Evan Cookman. He's doing great work in the middle of doing some church planting right now.
Yep, we're set to start planting in August of this 24.
Yeah.
So that's a couple months away.
Yeah, and today we're going to be talking about XCOM 2 because I discovered XCOM 2 a while ago. I have to say it's about 4 years now that I've heard of XCOM, and as I was getting into tactical RPGs, I really found my love with Fire Emblem, mostly because of the permadeath of like, no, when a person dies, they are dead. Finding that out maybe just grasp onto tactical RPGs so much.
If you like dead soldiers, you're gonna like XCOM 2.
Yeah, and so I heard XCOM is very similar in that, and it's a very classic one. And so years back when I finally found a copy, a used copy at GameStop, I was like, you know what, I'll pick it up. And so I picked it up and I tried it for a tiny bit. Boy, it's rough. It's a hard game, not unfair. Well, we'll get into it. I mean, RNG is RNG. That's, you know, XCOM's thing. But it was a point to where I was like, all right, you know what, this game's cool, but you know what, I'm gonna put it back on the shelf. I'll go play some Mario or something at the moment. And so I have not really jumped into XCOM 2, really give it a full hurrah into it and try it out. But as I've gotten into certain kind of moods to actually jump in, you love XCOM, and you made it clear that, hey, wait until I'm in the area before we deal with XCOM. And so luckily, because you have been in the area, I have been given the opportunity to jump into XCOM, re-look at it, revisit it, as you have been accompanying me to kind of like
a guide on your XCOM journey.
This is true. The beginnings of my true XCOM journey.
Not only am I a spiritual guide, I am also an XCOM guide.
Not only have you helped with my Christianity and learning about God, but I also will learn about XCOM. Just to start off, again, what is XCOM 2? I think we should probably get into it for those who don't know, because while it is a classic, like at this point, it's one like the top tier like tactics game. For me, and I've talked with some other people, unless you're old, you probably haven't played XCOM 2 just because it seems like an old game, and so sometimes it's hard to jump into it unless they're easy to access.
Which I also think the reason why most people, like, I never heard of XCOM 2, and that's because it's not really something that it's easily marketable. It's a niche game.
Yeah, definitely XCOM 2 is very much a niche game that like has a cult following for sure. Like, people love XCOM if they played it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is something that like I don't hear a lot of people getting into XCOM 2 or where jumping in. There's a bunch of other tactical games that I feel like a lot of people go to first.
Well, how I got into XCOM 2 was I play Xbox a lot because my friends who actually play online play Xbox. But at heart, I'm a PlayStation guy. So it was a free game with the monthly subscription, and I went into it blind. I'd never heard of it. I had no idea what it was. I just went, okay, here's an alien face made out of human skulls. This is probably going to be a good go. I didn't have anyone to guide me through it. I just did it by myself. I'll admit, I think I definitely lost, I know for sure, my first campaign, and maybe even my second campaign. I lost. I didn't win.
I was gonna say, which is something we'll get into with the nature of it being like there's permadeath and how it's structured. A game that I have played and covered and enjoyed a lot is Darkest Dungeon. And for people who know Darkest Dungeon, it has a lot of similar mechanics in the sense of its character roster and like the units you get to use, and the fact that like as you go on, if you just lose your units, can't really get more units, you could lose. And especially like at least with Darkest Dungeon, it's a roguelike, so it's more within the genre of replayability of redoing runs. For a full-on normal game, RPG game, having it to where you could just fail, crazy.
Yeah, I mean, but once you get it down, like I haven't lost a campaign in a very long time. And a lot of that's because I'll be honest, I'll just out myself. I don't really play Iron Man. I've done a few Iron Man campaigns, but by and large, if I go through a nasty squad wipe, I'm just like, I reject this reality, and I'm going to go through that long loading screen, and I'm going to save scum.
Dude, that was one thing I was not expecting jumping back in. As you have been in town and we've been playing a bit of XCOM 2, the amount of loading screens is so long. There's multiple loading screens, and it just takes so long. And part of it is like, all right, it's an older game, but still, oh my goodness, it's hilarious.
And that's one of the things about it that we were joking around with is like, hey, do you want a game that you can play and text your friends? XCOM's for you.
You definitely need a second monitor for some other video or something to watch, like something else, which is fine. Like there's games out there, and there's moments when you want that type of game of like relaxation. Like I was talking with you how it's like it reminded me a lot of like Civilization, those type of games where it's like, oh, you have a long period of times you can sit down, really relax, and have something else going on. Not only does the game have like kind of like similarities of as I mentioned, Darkest Dungeon, and its kind of mechanics of its roster of like you have a bunch of units, a lot of them die if you're not like excellent at it, and like you have that kind of same kind of roster.
If you are
feel.
excellent, there's in the XCOM community, there's a saying. That's XCOM, baby. Sometimes you can do everything right, and the RNG, they just roll a crit. And your whole plan falls apart.
So yeah, and like part of that is like, as I was shared, that it's connected to Darkest Dungeon, is that it has like a random generated maps for its mission, which is not normal for a lot of tactical games because of the tactical nature. A lot of each map, each scenario is so well designed in the sense of like, all right, this is the puzzle piece you basically got to figure out. And for XCOM 2 to be like, no, pre-generated, let's see what happens. Like you have the objective, but
right, which I think to clarify, like, what is XCOM 2?
What is XCOM 2?
That's a great question. I'm glad that you asked. No.
Oh, you're welcome.
So XCOM 2 is a tactical RPG. It's turn-based, and what it is you are the commander. Yeah, who is a very generic individual, so that you,
man or woman,
get to be the commander. There's no skin attached to it. There are two elements to the game. There's your base building and your world map. Your base building, there's lots of different structures that you can build inside of your big ship that is called the Avenger. The way that you choose to build is going to impact, like you can go fast lab to try and get those Psi soldiers early game, or you can go early with like a GTS and then an advanced warfare center, just stuff like that. Then there's the world map that drops out things for you to choose, because how you unlock stuff is by scanning. So there's going to be things they're going to say, okay, well, you can scan here. Your economy is made by making contact with other resistance cells and then building radio towers, and that's how you gain supplies. So you can't ignore your economy, because then you can't afford your upgrades, which you do at your research lab and you build in your engineering lab. So you have to choose, what are you going to spend your time scanning? Because something that's going on in the background of XCOM is there's always a timer that's clicking. And that timer is what is advancing the enemy units. And that's one of the things that I really like about it. They're going to be introducing the harder enemies, whether you're doing the story missions or not.
There's a part of me that wishes this mechanic was more public. I wish it was like in your face as a mechanic. But like the reason why I love this is because it adds the stakes.
Well, and XCOM has a really steep learning curve. Once you get late game gear and late game soldiers, the difficulty tapers off, and there's really not much they can throw at you that you can't handle. Noah brought up the Doom counter, that if you're not about sabotaging what the aliens are up to, no spoilers, then you're going to lose the game. So you always have to be balancing out, how are you going to be reducing the Doom counter on top of getting your guys squared away. And that's a fun mechanic. And then the second mechanic, which we were talking about earlier, is the actual combat.
The story, it's nice. It's good.
Fun.
It's good. It's a good time.
I haven't watched it in probably 3 years.
Yeah, as we're playing it and you're showing some of the stuff, you're like, all right, skip, which makes sense. You know, if you're playing the game so many times, you know, that's understandable. And that's a great part you were to share where it's like, cool, if you're somebody who is replaying with this game, has a major focus on replayability, being able to just skip the cutscene, that it's great. That's like very nice.
When Tygan comes out and he's like, no one could have foreseen that the aliens were. I'm like, got it.
But yeah, so the main focus of why you would play this game is mostly the gameplay, the actual jumping in and playing the tactical sides. There's a lot of choices with base building, what you actually do, and so I love the variety of choices. But even just jumping into the game, the tactics side of the game is what really drawn me into wanting to play this game.
If you don't like the combat system, you're not gonna like XCOM, because one of the reasons why I think it has infinite replayability is that I love the combat. Everything else, all the base building, all the world stuff, you know, it's whatever, but I enjoy the gameplay. It's smooth, the animations are cool,
the ragdoll is always fun.
Yeah,
it shares that level of like, because I would argue that this is a bit more of a harder, or as you're saying, the steep learning curve of this kind of tactical game is more than other tactical games. But having this kind of hard level and like with permadeath, and if units die, they're dead, and then sharing that with the same space of like, oh, I killed an alien and they ragdolled, and it's just hilarious at the same time.
Right, and they make this wonderful little like
Hey, have you ever been watching my videos and you're like, wow, I actually really appreciate that content? Here's the thing. I am not making money off of YouTube yet. So in the meantime, I've been doing Patreon. So I have a Patreon. If you want to support me, I mean, always, if you want to support me, you could just watch more of my stuff. That does greatly help me a lot. But if you want to go even further beyond, I do have a Patreon, and I have some tiers that hopefully can provide value to you. It's in a little bit of a weird spot right now, I won't lie, only because this year, since I'm doing my game right vow, to where I'm not doing my normal schedule of reviews and etc. I'm kind of doing backlog stuff, so we've been using a wheel to decide what games I cover. But basically, what you get to do on the Patreon, one, besides just supporting me and allowing me to actually be able to keep providing content, well, not only that, you get mentioned, it means a lot to me. There's several different tiers. One that's like, first tier is like just $1. If you just want to give me $1, awesome, I appreciate it. It does matter and mean a lot to me. And once we get up to the $5 here, this is where we kind of start bumping up the pay grade here. See, the biggest thing that I can provide for you guys is really letting you guys decide what games I actually cover. So actually getting to suggest games to be reviewed. Every Patreon member who is level 5 or above will actually be able to suggest games that we will be playing in the future. Now, the caveat is that every Patreon member, whether you're in the first tier or above, gets to vote on deciding what games we play. This is a way to where you guys get to actually make an impact, maybe see some games that I probably wouldn't have thought to suggest, but because you guys have a hankering of like, ooh, you gotta play this game, and then with you guys actually coming together and voting, boom, we can actually play that. And it does help me out a lot. It really does mean a lot. Now, the biggest member, what they actually get for paying $10 a month, which again, greatly appreciate, actually get a raw reaction video after I'm done with one of my videos, usually my review videos. I don't know what it is, but every single time I get done with making a video, there's always something that I'm like, man, I forgot to mention this, or etc. And if there's some other kind of thoughts I can think of, I'm like, these were some of the behind the scenes of this videos, my thoughts, my feelings, just different kind of shenanigans. This is a spot to where I can just provide extra value. Since you are providing $10, this is a small way that I can actually give back in a unique way. In the future, I do hope to do more with Patreon. Just right now, this is kind of what I'm limited to do. But again, if you want to support me, it's greatly appreciated. Okay, well, now back to Evan and I yapping about XCOM 2.
Who gets eaten by a black ooze. And probably not a good career move, but she did it. Now I've lost track of where we are. Oh, yeah. So we're talking about the combat of it. You've got 4 classes. Each class has 2 paths as they level up that you can take. You can also mix and match perks, and you can either follow one specifically and make a really specific soldier, or you can mix and match. You've got your rangers. They're your high crit, melee, they run in, they get it done.
It's great.
Yep. You have snipers who, interestingly enough, you've got your long shot snipers that they focus on long range. The end game, they're monsters. They're early game, you got to nurse them. So they're kind of like your mage.
You got to make sure they make it. They're very glass cannon-y.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, end game, they're monsters. They rack up more kill streaks than your rangers. You have your grenadier, and you can go one of two focuses. One is the actual grenadier, where they're going to have more grenades,
explosives.
Yeah, lots of bonuses to that. Like there's one that I really like called Salvo, which if you start your turn by launching a grenade, it's a free action.
Dang!
Right, but then you can also focus on the minigun side, and they're super accurate. They're really useful. And then the fourth class is the specialist. They're either going to be like your medic, your combat medic.
This one's your favorite, right?
Yeah, no, they're not at all. They're your utility guy.
Yeah.
You can either spec them out to be a healer. And so then the final class that you haven't seen, because honestly, even though they're one of the greatest and most useful in the game, and they're actually the true wizard, not really the sniper, is your psi operatives. You're not going to get to see any on this video because I don't build them. You have to research psi operatives. You got to train them in a special think tank. And so usually, like by end game,
it's a lot of investment to eventually get them.
And by end game, it's like I already have a tactical squad who have been in this since Operation Gatecrasher, and I don't need some magic wielding noob. But
when I play the game, that's what I'm going to do. I'm committed now.
Right. So you're going to want to start a playthrough. Your first thing that you build is a lab.
That's the... okay.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and then getting into the actual, like, each match, playing it. I kept mentioning to you while we were playing it and looking at it that it reminds me a lot of Mario and Raving Rabbids, the tactical game that came out, because it's that same style of tactical game. It has a focus on cover. Like, that's a pretty prominent, like, mechanic to it. And another one is, like, Overwatch, of, like, instead of using my action to shoot, I am just going to be waiting until I see someone move by and gets into my field of zone. Then I'm going to shoot at them. And then another aspect that I love, as you kind of mentioned earlier, of like people blowing up your cover, the world can break a bit, including buildings and stuff.
More or less everything's destructible.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun. Overwatch is really useful for setting up ambushes. Enemy groups are called pods, and they're wandering around. And so if you move and you don't see any enemies and you're not going to be engaged, you just throw everybody in Overwatch. And then when the pod wanders into your field of vision, they get hurt.
The pod system is actually the one system that I think is the most off-putting to people. It's an important part of how you actually play the game. If you're not paying attention, you can run in and trigger multiple pods at the same time, and that means in this moment you have to deal with much more forces than you normally have to. And it's like that's kind of like a big prominent focus, is making sure you progress space and cover space and get in good spots without triggering too many pods, so that you don't have to deal with so many enemies all at once. You were kind of mentioning later on that the most you get of troops in your group is 6. When you're running with so few units, you can easily get outnumbered, and just the action economy of like the other units can mess you up. So really learning how to like deal with pods and actually find them and not push too far is kind of like that's the learning curve, I would say, to a big part. I enjoyed what I did with playing XCOM. I had a good time with it, but I do remember that was kind of the most off-putting part was the pod system. And so just being aware of it, I think would help a lot if you're jumping into it. Is just know that, like, hey, this is the game. This is part of the game, and knowing that, I think it helps a lot. Why do you love XCOM so much?
XCOM 2 and XCOM 2 War of the Chosen, they're no matter what, they're in top 10 greatest video games ever made. The maps are always randomly generated. So they're gonna have recurring themes, but it's always a different fight. It's always a different experience, and it's what gives it that infinite replayability, because every campaign's going to be different in its own way. It's going to be the same in that, Commander, the aliens continue to make progress on the Avatar project. If we're going to slow them down, we need to get moving. Central. Buddy boy, what do you think we've been doing? What do you think we've been working at? Go ask Tygan, what's he doing? But if you love the one thing, you're going to love the game. And unlike a lot of RPGs that are going to take up, you're going to have to sit down and play for like 3-4 hours before you feel like you've accomplished anything. I enjoyed the Fallout series. Every time I sit down and play those games or do a campaign, my wife's like, oh no, because those sessions are always like 4 or 5 hours long. What I like about XCOM is I can pop it in and I can just do a mission and then walk away.
Yeah, having that choice of hey, if you want to sit down, as we were mentioning earlier, if you want this to be like, all right, Sunday afternoon, cleared off, got like whatever I'm gonna binge on the second monitor, we're gonna be playing this. You could do that and have a long session. But if you're like here and go, you only have like a tiny bit. All right, I'll just jump in, do a mission, call it. Both
Right.
work.
Oh, here's another thing that we haven't really talked about much, and it's the customizability
Yeah,
of your units.
you can personalize these units.
Oh,
These
yeah.
units are people.
Yeah, you can give them whole new names, backstories. You can go in and customize the way that they look.
Even getting to put in your the character's bio. It's like, no. He has a story. And just really going into depth of making your character, making your friends, making just celebrities. Like, all right, we're doing all Simpson characters. Like,
Yeah, I've done it. I have actually done a Simpsons playthrough.
I'm not surprised. You
legitimately-
love Simpsons,
yeah.
so I'm not surprised.
Like I've done Simpsons, I've done Stargate, I've done Star Trek. I don't like doing real people because
See, I mentioned of like, let's do like Christians for the Bible. And you're like,
yeah, I don't like the idea of
No,
Joseph
you're-
in his Technicolor dream coat
yeah.
getting smoked by Septicon.
You're like, no.
I don't have a problem with reformers.
That's what you're telling me, which is
we could-
funny.
yeah, I mean, like Zwingli actually died in combat, so to have him
We're-
fighting aliens is like apropos.
I think deep down I think a lot of it is also like for you it's a separation to keep this like, hey, this is a video game, because you've mentioned to me with your feelings about like even to the point of like watching war films nowadays of like a big part of why enjoying these kind of games that have war focus, or even like XCOM where it's like you're shooting and you're killing and having the separation.
Yeah.
And the fact of like this game doesn't glorify killing, it doesn't glorify war, and it doesn't glorify a lot of this stuff. Like, sure, it has what I would call very 80s war style to it.
Oh yeah.
Like Independence Day, yeah, no, great.
Right. And so I guess that segues really well into like, should Christians play XCOM 2?
Yeah.
And to speak into that, for me as a Christian, just so you all kind of know my background, I spent my teens and my 20s as a hard drinking, drug doing, womanizing, bar fighting punk rock guy. More or less, without getting too much into it, I kind of fall under the adult convert category. I was 27 when I really surrendered my life and my will over to the care of God. Prior to that, if I did have a belief in God, I hadn't surrendered my life, which meant I was like taking the parts of the Bible that I felt were like okay, and then just ignoring the parts that were inconvenient. One of the things I really struggled with was having this feeling that like I rejected rules, laws, and authority. I was a rebel. And so allowing myself to submit to God's authority and his rules and laws was really difficult for me at first as a concept, but then when I did it, that's when I really learned like they're there for your good. God wants you to have the best life. And so he says, when I started thinking of them not as rules and laws and like here's a pitfall to avoid, here's a snare, it made it a lot easier. But all that to say is that I came to a point where violent video games used to not bother me, and I have noticed that I'm starting to get to a point where I've become sensitive to violence, nudity, sexual themes. And that's one of the things that I like about XCOM is that it's not really gory. Even like war games, like when I play Call of Duty, I am aware that in war there are other human beings. The United States has done a really good job of demonizing people that are war machines ramped up against. But in reality, they're human beings made in the image of God.
They still have human life. There's value.
Hopes,
There's value in
dreams.
that.
Yeah. So I just have developed a sensitivity to it.
Sure.
And that even playing Fallout 4, they'd like, oh, the Raiders.
Yeah, I was gonna say, gotta go kill those Raiders.
Yeah, don't worry about it. They're bad guys. And it's
Yeah.
like you just run around and they're in their camp, they're doing their thing, and then you just roll up like ha 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 ha. And don't worry, I have rusty knuckles. We'll make this quick. Pow! and then their head explodes. I can do it, but it's just like there's that little twinge in me that
Just
goes
like,
like,
huh.
I just took a life.
Yeah.
Which really brings to say is that as far as like the rating system, XCOM remains PG. I think the worst swear word in it is the DAMN word. And I think that's like the worst one.
That's all I've seen from it. So it's very, again, has that like 80s war film. Like even not even that bad, but like again, like Independence Day. Like it's got that feel to it. It's just as tame as that, as wild as that. And I don't think it's that bad.
Well, here's something I love about it. This is another thing that I love. There is no romancing. It doesn't happen. There is no dialogue choices, which I really enjoy the Mass Effect series. I really enjoy the Mass Effect series.
Yeah, I don't like the sex part.
And that's why now when I play Mass Effect, I just ignore all those flirty things because in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't have time for this.
No. I have a job.
Mission. And it's to murder every alien who doesn't think like I do.
Yeah, because they're bad.
Yeah.
I'm right.
Yeah.
The only thing I saw when I briefly looked up stuff, and other people saying that XCOM 2 is more violent than some other tactical games, and my theory is because of the permadeath, and so you have to take that more in. But honestly, the reason why I love permadeath is because of that reality. It really makes this more real in the sense of like, if you're playing a war game or a tactical game where there's killing, yeah, your unit should be able to die too.
But to bring it back to this idea about should Christians play it, and here's my honest thoughts on it is, I was reading Matthew, and Jesus says, it's not what goes into a person's body that defiles them. It's what comes out of a person's body, because that comes from the heart. And that's what is gauged whether it's clean or unclean. So if you're uncomfortable with XCOM, then yeah, just don't play it. There's all kinds
plenty of other games. Even if you want to play like a tactical game that has similar mechanics, I would say Mario Raven Rabbids, very nice because it's more cartoony, but it has some of the same tactical feels. Like if you want that mechanic still, you can go there if you want.
Right. When I say that the things you take in, because there are obvious exceptions, and for me that one's like pornography.
Yeah, no, there's lines in the sand.
Right.
And they, like, sure, to some degree, it all depends on the person, but there are some things that's just like, no, don't do that. Don't take in sin.
Right. And my honest thoughts on XCOM is that I don't feel like it hinders my spiritual life. I never feel icky after playing XCOM. There are things as a Christian that I partake in that makes me feel icky, and that's barometer to let me know that I probably shouldn't be doing this. That if I can't go to the Lord with a clear conscience, then do I really need to be about it? That's one of the things I love about XCOM, man. I can play XCOM and I have no internal sensors are telling me not to be playing this.
It's one of those where it all depends, which is hard for us to talk about, right? Because it's like, hey, should you be doing this? I don't know what you're doing. But
ask yourself.
Yeah.
Should you be doing this? What do you think?
The biggest answer is always like, hey, go talk to God.
Yep.
It all depends on your relationship. I mean, it's good to have these boundaries. It's good to have awareness of yourself, of know what could be triggers that might cause you to sin or fall away from God. But there's also things that like, hey, I can play this and it's okay. The thing I still like that I latched on that I have appreciation for XCOM is, again, that permadeath. Death doesn't have meaning in a lot of games. And so I think if you haven't played a game with permadeath, it can help with bringing that realization of like, life matters. Jesus loves you, and that's about it.
Jesus loves you, and so do I.
Shalom.
Shalom. Lame. Not doing
I was gonna say.
All right.
Awesome options.
Oh, dude, should I put them in short shorts?
Yes, you could. I thought about doing it for me. And
Who wears short shorts? Oh yeah, dude.
Just some trunks. It's perfect.
Yeah, I'm wearing cargo shorts right now.
You gotta be breezy to be able to run.
Yeah.
And all those pockets.